Hello, and welcome to another 2-minute tip. Today we're going to be going over the user interface on the Accuson Sequoia, now the Siemens Sequoia. This is one of the items that frequently requires repair on the system, mostly because it has all of the controls, all of the buttons, including the switches that are used most often. Let me start out by showing you the features and functions on the outside of it, and then when we remove it and flip it over, you'll be able to see which components those are from the inside. For starters, we have the begin and end module that's up here. This is a separate device you'll be able to see on the inside, and that will sometimes vary depending on the type of system. This matching component on the other side is called the futures module, and it's one that they could add different options and change the switches on it. So it's another item that sometimes changes with a different system, and you will have to make sure you have the right one and also the right overlay for it. The alphanumeric keyboard is a standard type keyboard, and once the bezel is removed, that actually comes right out and is easily replaceable. Most of the switches on the system are part of an integrated PC switch, where you have a plastic or a rubber membrane that pushes down and actuates the switch. It's not part of an actual switch. The encoders are real switches. Most of them are also the optical encoder and the push button switches, and those can be replaced. The DGC slide pots, those can be soldered on and off of the board, and they can be removed. You don't have to replace the entire user interface for that. You have what they refer to as the kidney keys or kidney switches on either side of the trackball, and that acts mostly like the left and right trackball like you would on a PC, and does selections. You have the run, freeze, gain switch right here in the middle. That also is a separate unit that's replaceable as well, and you'll be able to see all of that on here. So all of these switches and all of these controls are either part of individual features or part of the overall user interface. What we're going to do in just a moment is I'll show you how to remove the bezel, take that off, how to remove the user interface. We'll flip that over and do a close-up on that, and we'll be able to see the components on the back side, and then I'll show you how the user interface and the front panel processor are sandwiched together and how to take that apart to service it. So let's take a closer look. Looking at it from the bottom, there are 9 screws that run all the way around the bezel and 2 more right in the middle for a total of 11 screws. I've already removed those screws to loosen up the bezel. Once you do that, you pop off the one knob. The bezel will lift right off. What you'll do the first time, if you're not careful, is you'll yank these connectors right out of the bottom. These are the connectors that go for the switches on either side of the trackball, and they just pop out. Once you do that, the bezel removes and be taken out of the way. Now you've got a series of screws that are right around the user interface panel, and you can see all those very readily, except for a couple that hid underneath here. There's 3 back there that look like you can't get to them. Let me show you how you get to those. If you haven't seen it before, to remove the MO bezel for the MO drive, right behind the Sequoia label is the hidden screw that you want to get to. Just pop that off. It's thick. It's stuck onto the back, and you just set it aside. Once you do that, there's a single screw in the middle. You take that off. The MO bezel will pull forward where it's clipped at the top, and then we'll slide up and out of the way. That gives you an extra about a ½ inch space on the back side. With that space, you can get to 3 screws that hold the rear of the system down. These are the only screws that are not obvious in the system. You'll look behind there and wonder how to get to them. The rest of them are on the side and very readily accessible. Once the screws are out and it's loose, you can lift up the front of it, and it'll pull just slightly forward. You have a ribbon cable for the trackball, ribbon cable for the connectors going to the kidney switches, and then in the very back you have 2 connectors, both of which are different. Pop those off. And the serial interface on the side. Those are both different as well. The whole assembly removes, and I'll show you how to take it apart and what components are on there. On the inside, you can see the cables that came off. They're tied pretty securely. I'd be careful, make sure they don't drop back. It leaves a trackball left in its tray that's not mounted. It drops in and out, sits on a foam pad, and that's all there is to it. Now we'll take a look at the sandwiched together platform of the user interface. Now let's take a look at a couple of items that you can see with the bezel removed that you couldn't see before. First of all, the keyboard assembly is a little bit interesting. This is actually the push buttons for the keyboard, but below that is one of the membrane style keyboards. So this can be taken off and dusted, or if it's physically broken, be removed quickly and easily. Lift it straight off and it'll expose the push buttons down here below. Sometimes these will physically break, and when they do, you can actually see that. The other item is probably the highest failure item on here is this one right here. And you can see very readily how that's connected. You can just tilt this up slightly without even removing the whole thing, take off the top nut, unplug it, drop this right out, and you can replace that in 10 minutes very easily. So that's a very quickly replaceable part, unlike most of the other items on here.